All right, so get this. We're diving deep today into what truly gets us going.
Yeah.
You know, beyond those old school carrot and stick ideas about motivation.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Yeah, we're tackling Daniel Pink's drive. And honestly, this book flipped the script for me.
It's a real eye-opener, for sure.
Yeah, like you think rewards are the answer, right?
It's logical.
But Pink's saying they can actually backfire, especially when we're talking about creative work.
That's a big claim.
It is, but he calls it the Sawyer effect. Basically, giving people external rewards for something they already enjoy. It makes them as ever interested in doing it once the reward's gone.
So it's like paying kids to do puzzles. Suddenly, puzzles aren't fun anymore.
Exactly. They become a chore.
And that's just scratching the surface. Pink argues that this old motivation 2.0 system, as he calls it, the reward and punishment thing, it worked fine for simpler tasks. But it just doesn't cut it in today's world.
Right. It's not like we're all on assembly lines anymore.
Hmm.
Most jobs require creativity, problem solving, thinking outside the box.
You need that intrinsic motivation.
So what's the alternative? Pink calls it motivation 3.0, right?
Spot on. It's about tapping into our innate desires, those things that really light us up from the inside.
And those are,
Autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
okay, those are big words. Let's unpack them one by one. I think when people hear autonomy, they imagine working from home in their PJs, calling all the shots.
Right, but it goes deeper than that.
So it's not just about freedom from the office.
Not entirely. Autonomy in the Motivation 3.0 sense is about having control. Control over how you approach your work.
So it could mean some flexibility in your schedule.
Sure, that's part of it. But it's more about having a say in which tasks you take on, how you solve problems, even who you collaborate with.
It's about feeling ownership, right?
Exactly, like you're a genuine contributor, not just following orders.
Didn't Google have that famous 20% time policy? Wasn't that all about autonomy?
They did. It was revolutionary at the time. Employees could dedicate 20% of their work week to passion projects, and that's how innovations like Gmail were born.
Wow, so giving people freedom to explore actually led to real results.
It did, although Google has since moved away from that policy. It still stands as a powerful example of what can happen when you trust people to pursue their own ideas.
That's fascinating. But for our listener, I think the key question is, how much autonomy do you have in your work right now?
That's the million-dollar question.
And if it's not enough to really feel motivated, what's one small step you could take to change that?
That's a good one. I'd say start by really looking at your work situation. Like, what's one thing you wish you had more control over?
That's a good starting point, because sometimes we just accept things as they are. We don't even question if there's another way.
Right, we get stuck in that routine.
And it doesn't have to be some huge overhaul.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as asking to shift your hours or suggesting a different way to approach a project
It's about taking those small steps.
and realizing that our motivation is ultimately our own responsibility.
Absolutely. Pink makes that very clear. Motivation 3.0 isn't something that's done to us.
We're not just passive recipients waiting for a reward.
Exactly. It's about actively cultivating that inner drive.
And this brings me back to something we touched on earlier. Those external rewards, the carrots and sticks.
Yeah, what about them?
Pink argues that they can actually be harmful to our motivation.
He does, and it's a pretty radical idea.
It goes against everything we've been taught, right?
It does challenge the conventional wisdom.
But he presents a lot of research to back it up. Especially when it comes to creative work, those external rewards can actually stifle our intrinsic motivation.
So it's not just that they're ineffective, they can actually make things worse.
It's like they crowd out that natural desire to learn and grow for the pure joy of it.
He calls this the Sawyer effect, right?
Yeah, it's that study where they paid people to solve puzzles.
Yeah.
And it actually made them a little less interested in the puzzles once the payment stopped.
It's wild when you think about it.
It is, because it shows that our motivation is much more complex than just do this, get that.
And it has huge implications for how we approach work, both as individuals and within organizations.
So for all the managers and leaders listening, this is a big shift in thinking.
It is a fundamental shift, moving away from that transactional model of motivation,
Where it's all about rewards and punishments.
and instead focusing on creating an environment that nurtures intrinsic motivation.
Which sounds amazing, but also maybe a little daunting.
I hear you, it's a big change.
So where do we even begin? How do we practically apply these principles in our own workplaces?
Well, Pink offers a whole toolkit of strategies and drive.
Give us some highlights. What are some of the key things leaders can do?
Well, first and foremost, it's about recognizing that people are not just cogs in a machine.
They're human beings with their own unique needs and aspirations.
Exactly. And they need to feel valued, respected, and empowered.
And that means giving them more autonomy,
Right, giving them more control over how they approach their work
providing opportunities for mastery,
so they can develop their skills and feel that sense of progress.
and fostering a sense of purpose.
Connecting their work to something larger than themselves.
And it's not just about making people happy at work.
Although that's certainly a nice bonus.
It's about unlocking their potential, which ultimately benefits everyone.
Studies have shown that companies that prioritize intrinsic motivation see significant improvements in productivity, creativity, and even employee retention.
So it's a win-win for both individuals and organizations.
Precisely. It's about creating a work environment where people are naturally driven to do their best work, not because they're chasing a carrot, but because they feel genuinely engaged and passionate about what they're doing.
Okay, but I can already hear some leaders saying, this all sounds great, but it's not realistic in my industry, or my team just isn't like that.
I get that. It can feel overwhelming to try to overhaul an entire company culture.
So it's a good first step. How can leaders start small and build momentum?
The beauty of Pink's approach is that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can start with small experiments, little tweaks to your existing systems.
So it's about testing the waters, seeing what works.
Exactly. Maybe you give your team more flexibility in their schedules, or you create opportunities for them to share their ideas and contribute to decision-making.
It's about creating those little pockets of autonomy and mastery.
And as you start to see the positive impact of these changes, it will reinforce your commitment to this new way of thinking about motivation.
I'm thinking about all the inspiring examples Pink shares and drive companies like Google, TMS Shoes, and so many others. They didn't achieve this overnight, did they?
Not at all. It was a process of trial and error, of constantly iterating and refining their approach.
It's about embracing that growth mindset, not just for individuals, but for organizations as a whole.
Exactly. It's about fostering a culture of curiosity, experimentation, and continuous improvement.
And it's not just about the bottom line.
It's about creating a world where people feel more fulfilled, more engaged, and more connected to their work.
You know, one of the things that really struck me in Drive was Pink's distinction between algorithmic work and heuristic work.
Oh, that's a powerful concept.
Algorithmic work, the kind of task that can be automated, is becoming increasingly less valuable in today's economy.
While heuristic work, which requires creativity, critical thinking, and that spark of human ingenuity, is becoming more and more essential.
And this highlights why this shift to Motivation 3.0 is so crucial.
Because it's about nurturing those uniquely human skills that can't be replicated by machines.
Things like empathy, collaboration, innovation, and that ability to see the big picture.
And those are the skills that are going to drive success in the future.
And intrinsic motivation is what fuels those skills.
It's what drives us to not just complete tasks, but to excel, to push boundaries, and to make a meaningful contribution to the world.
So it's not just about changing the way we work, it's about changing the way we think about work.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's a fundamental shift in perspective, from seeing work as a chore to seeing it as an opportunity for growth, contribution, and self-expression.
It's about finding that sweet spot where our passions align with the needs of the world.
And when that happens, magic happens. People come alive. They're engaged, they're productive, and they're making a real difference.
You know, as we've been talking, I've been thinking a lot about my own work and how I can apply these principles more intentionally.
Me too. It's been a really thought-provoking conversation.
It has, and I think the key takeaway for our listeners is that Motivation 3.0 isn't some far-off utopia. It's something we can start cultivating today.
Absolutely. It starts with taking that first step, however small.
Experiment, be curious, and be open to the possibilities.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be setbacks, there will be challenges, but if we stay committed to nurturing our intrinsic motivation,
The rewards will be well worth the effort. Yeah, it's like planting a seed. You nurture it, give it time and space to grow.
and eventually you have this amazing tree that bears fruit.
And that fruit, in this case, is a more fulfilling and productive work life.
A life where work isn't just something you do, it's something you're passionate about.
So to wrap up this deep dive into Drive, what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
The message I really hope sticks with people is that motivation isn't something that just happens to us.
It's not like the weather, something we just have to endure.
Right, we have agency, we have choices,
And we can actively cultivate our own intrinsic motivation.
and inspire it in others.
So for our listeners who are ready to take action, what's one concrete step they can take this week to really tap into their Motivation 3.0?
I would say think about one area of your work where you feel that spark of excitement, that sense of
And
flow.
that might not be your whole job, right?
No, it could be just one small task or project.
So find that thing that really lights you up.
And figure out how you can make it even more engaging.
Maybe it's taking on more responsibility.
Or finding a creative way to approach it.
The key is to be intentional about nurturing your intrinsic motivation.
Don't just wait for it to happen, make it happen.
And remember, this isn't just about individual fulfillment,
It's about creating a better world of work for everyone.
where people feel valued, empowered, and inspired to do their best work.
Because when people are motivated from within, that's when the real magic happens.
This has been such a fascinating conversation.
I really enjoyed it.
And I know I'm walking away with a whole new perspective on motivation.
Me too. It's definitely made me rethink some things.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Motivation 3.0.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll catch you next time for another deep dive into the ideas that are shaping our world.